Let's get ready to rumble! You can't handle the truth. Awesome, baby, we're top of the line.
As I have already said numerous times, I got to admit I was shocked that Putin went ahead and sent troops into Ukraine. I really thought he was using this as a way to goad people like Biden, allowing them on the world stage to keep insinuating the invasion is imminent. It's going to happen at any moment. And the more Biden kept doing that, the more ridiculous and foolish he looked, as no invasion actually happened. But apparently, Putin wants to make good on his promise, his ideology to reunify the Soviet states. Now, that all said, though there is a, quote, what we call the fog of war, and there are people being hurt, there are even innocent civilians that are getting hurt. Some have been killed, and all of that is tragic, and our heart does go out to the people of Ukraine. But it doesn't change a few core facts here that Ukraine as a government of itself is completely corrupt. In fact, it is the most corrupt government in all of Europe, and I believe it is ranked 9th most corrupt in the world. That's pretty significant considering its relative small size and its newness, if you will, as an independent sovereign state. But that all said, we get in this fog of war. The propaganda comes at us fast and furious. And I told you in the very beginning, before he ever invaded, I wasn't 100% sure really what was going to go on. Because again, you were getting information from all over. And now we're even getting conflicting reports of how deep are they? Is it really what we're seeing portrayed? All I can tell you is we'll walk through a little bit of what I find to be some things that are, as Artie Johnson would say on Laugh-In, very interesting. Now, let's begin again by a quick review. Joe Biden, when he was vice president, his son, Hunter, was making enormous amounts of money working on the board for a company called Burisma. Let's have just a little stroll down memory lane.
When he said, "I hope you know what you're doing," what did he think you were doing?
Well, he read the press reports that I joined the board of Burisma, which was a Ukrainian natural gas company. And there's been a lot of misinformation about me, not about my dad. Nobody buys that, but it buys this idea that I was unqualified to be on the board.
What were your qualifications to be on the board of Burisma?
Well, I was vice chairman of the board of Amtrak for 5 years. I was the chairman of the board of the UN World Food Program. I was a lawyer for Boies Schiller Flexner, one of the most prestigious law firms in the world.
You didn't have any extensive knowledge about natural gas or Ukraine itself, though?
No, but I think that I had as much knowledge as anybody else that was on the board.
You were paid $50,000 a month for your position?
Look, I'm a private citizen. One thing that I don't have to do is sit here and open my kimono as it relates to how much money I make or did or didn't. But it's all been reported.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not.
So Burisma, based within Ukraine, paying Hunter Biden a whole lot of money. And by Hunter's basic own admission, he really got the gig because of his last name. In fact, I would dare say he probably got the gig because the then vice president told Burisma, "You give my son this gig." It is well documented. We have a former Hunter Biden associate who is well documented, but the media wouldn't give him the time of day because it was an election and they didn't want anything bad to come out on Joe Biden. They were in full-blown propaganda mode to rid the world of Orange Man. So we couldn't hear from the former associate of Hunter Biden who has provable documentation of the money that Hunter took and how it was dispersed and how much of it went directly into Joe Biden's pocket. There is no doubt Ukraine was buying influence into the Obama White House, into what they believe one day would be the Biden White House and not just the Obama White House. So they were playing the long game. Hunter was nothing more than the mule bringing the money back to El Papa. And that becomes even clearer when the Attorney General for Ukraine was investigating Burisma for their just overt corruption. And that was bad for Joe Biden. He couldn't have his son being outed on the world stage for being involved with corruption, money laundering. So that Attorney General had to go. And Joe Biden, with a quid pro quo, used his power and influence to cut off funding from Ukraine if they didn't do exactly what he wanted done.
And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Now, of course, then candidate Joe Biden during the election got very testy when he was asked about all of this.
Questions and controversy continues today about Hunter Biden, your son's.
There is no controversy about my son.
dealing
It's
just
all a
questions.
lie. It's a flat lie because the president has nothing else to run on.
So let's start putting it all together. We have a nasty election cycle building between Donald J. Trump and Joe Biden. What happens right at the flip of that year, just before the so-called pandemic and corona outbreak? Impeachment number 2. What was impeachment number 2 over? A phone call between the president of Ukraine and one Donald J. Trump. And these so-called Ukraine insiders that had the dirt on that Donald Trump was putting pressure and force on Ukraine to, really expose Hunter Biden to the world with this whole phony accusation. And this was the president using his undue influence and withholding support and financial aid to fledgling Ukraine. And you remember all of that. And the so-called Ukraine whistleblowers, who no doubt were hedging their bets that all the money they had already invested into Joe Biden needed to pay off with a Biden administration. And now we see this happening. Big headlines. Joe Biden going to give unprecedented amounts of money in military aid to bolster the defenses of Ukraine. Let that sink in. Is this the payback? Is this the payoff? I was talking to some people who are actively engaged in the military right now, and they told me one of the things that they've noticed in watching this coverage and seeing what's happened is if Russia was remotely as powerful as it portrays itself to be, they literally could have wiped Ukraine in 2 days. They could have taken Kiev in a matter of hours. Now, on the one hand, this one military person I spoke with said, putting the propaganda aside for a moment, just the fact that he is an American warrior, he's looking at this saying, my goodness, give us some equipment, let us go over there, and we could end Russia in a matter of days, 2 weeks tops. As he's watching this unfold on the TV. And even the Biden White House has said, Putin isn't making as fast of advances as we thought he would. Now, again, is that because the the Russian military, like so much that comes out of these Soviet or communistic, I should say, type regimes, is illusion. We know for a fact that when Kim Jong-un stands there and watches his military parade by, and we see the trucks that are carrying the missiles, and we're watching the nose cones of the missiles do this because they're made out of rubber, because it's all an optical illusion for the people of North Korea and the world to see they have this military might. You have China, which claims to have this military might, but how much of that, again, is just optic and show, because their military has never actually really been engaged or tested on any level at anything. The only resource that they really have to throw is an endless supply of human sacrifices, people that they can throw into uniforms and just send out there to be sacrificial lambs. Or is there something else going on? Is Putin holding back and playing his B team army right now? Because one thing we're seeing is a whole lot of just tanks abandoned along the roadside. You know, it's not that they were blown up or under attack. They're just sitting there empty. They're being taken prisoners of war. They're surrendering at some points to the Ukraine defenses. You know, Putin's official word is that, hey, really, we're not there to level Ukraine, because we want to bring Ukraine back into the Russian Federation. Is it that? Or is this whole thing, some of you are not going to like this, but I'm just asking a question. I'm not making an emphatic statement. I'm asking a question. Is it a con? Is the whole thing a con? And now America and other nations are going to pony up. I said before, we could really, if Biden was serious about stopping Vlad Putin, one of the very first things he could do is cut off his oil. Make sure that no NATO nations bought oil from Russia. Well, the problem is, then he'd have to cut off U.S. oil. Oh, yes. Do you know that we get over 500,000 barrels of oil a day from Russia? 500,000 barrels a day from Russia. So put it all together now. We're going to give money to Ukraine for their defenses. Now, pray tell, what is this money going to do? Are they just magically able to take this money and turn it into tanks and what they need? Or is all of a sudden this conflict going to get resolved once the payoffs are done? How much of a kickback is Ukraine promising Vlad Putin? But Pastor, there are people that have been hurt and killed. Really? Are we really this naive to think that there are evil individuals in the world who would sacrifice people for money? I'm just asking questions right now, because here's another little telltale sign that I find interesting. Vlad Putin still has an active Twitter account. This is the official Twitter account of Vlad Putin. I've checked it. It's active. Just a few minutes ago, he was tweeting. So let me get this straight. This homicidal maniac who has been compared to Adolf Hitler trying to reconquer Europe, he's allowed to tweet. He's allowed to have an official Facebook page. A man who is engaged in what the lying legacy corporate corrupt mainstream media keeps referring to as almost a genocide. But the former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, can't tweet. He's banned. And Vlad Putin is not. Conservative social commentators and conservative news analysts and even progressive news analysts, anybody that doesn't tout the propaganda, gets muzzled, muted, censored, removed. And Vlad Putin gets to tweet? Start putting it all together. Don't let them play you for stupid. Again, we are watching, I believe, one big dog and pony show. It's more bread and circuses designed to keep us, on the one hand, divided, and on the other hand, the Democrats, the demagogues, the rhinos, they've got their boogeyman back. They can do Russia, 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 and make everybody afraid when they invoke the name of Vlad Putin. It's like the boogeyman coming to get you. And that's great when it comes to fundraising and talking tough on foreign policy when they're running for office. And it lets Joe Biden in a week get his standing ovation before the State of the Union to look like a strong president. We're being had. Pay attention.